Episode 109, Intimacy in a Mixed Faith Marriage with Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife. Hello, my beautiful friends. Today I have the privilege of chatting with Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife. If you're not familiar with her, you are in for a special treat. Dr. Finlayson-Fife is a well-respected relationship and sexuality coach. She has a PhD in counseling psychology. She teaches online personal and sexual development courses and is the host of Room for Two, a very popular sex and intimacy podcast. So, intimacy is a very important topic in any marriage and definitely comes up in mixed faith marriages. And I
Mhm.
am confident that Dr. Finlayson-Fife will share some great insights for all of us. So, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. This is just such a treat. So I'm super, super excited.
Mm.
Well, I would love to hear a little bit, like I shared your bio, but tell us a little bit about you, just personally who
Sure.
you are.
So I'm married and have three children who are now officially all adult children, just as of like a few weeks
Congratulations.
ago. Yeah. And let's see, I grew up in Vermont. My parents had come here from Idaho. My dad was a professor at the university here. But grew up LDS and was at BYU and studying psychology. And then when I went to get my PhD, I was really in the search of a dissertation topic, cared a lot about marriages, marital happiness, knew that was the focus that I wanted in my professional life, and wrote my dissertation on LDS women and sexuality, which, really, this was just kind of as the internet was starting to happen. And so I was interviewed on my dissertation, and I've just done a lot. I really have made my focus almost entirely an LDS audience and really focused on helping people have more intimate marriages and not just helping women around issues of sexuality, but men as well, and how to help people bridge their differences and create meaningful, intimate marriages, not just functional marriages, not just marriages that raise up kids, those are good things, good products of a marriage, but how do you actually cultivate a meaningful, intimate friendship in marriage? And so that's really been the focus of the coaching and teaching I do. And I'm working on a book right now about this integration of sexuality and spirituality with the LDS audience in mind. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I can't wait to read it. That sounds awesome. Um, well, okay, so I think my audience that's listening to this are primarily active believing members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that their spouse is either having a faith transition or they're completely out of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so as I coach these clients, their intimacy is definitely affected. And I would love to hear your take. Why is intimacy and connection affected so much when a spouse either has a faith transition or leaves the
Mm-hmm.
church completely?
Well, I think because the kind of fundamental foundation has been challenged. And, when you get married and you kind of have an assumption of similar beliefs, similar worldview, similar ideas about what marriage should be about, what should we create and do as married people, they're just sort of a given and they don't have to be really looked at that closely because it's just kind of been offered to you by the your church experience, and so you're just doing it together. And in a lot of ways this can actually mask people's differences because everyone's just sort of doing what they've been taught to do.
Yeah.
But then when someone starts to have doubts, questions, or fully leaves or determines it's not uh, right for them, well, it can really shatter this kind of shared foundation. And that is not just disruptive to the person who's leaving the church, it's of course very disruptive to the person who's staying, because it's like, well, wait, who are we then? What are we about? What are our goals? And we can barely have a conversation anymore because we are coming at the world from two different paradigms. And that's very, very tough. You see it with couples that have different political views, that,
Mhm.
two Catholics and one's a Democrat and one's a Republican. And it can just really be divisive because it feels almost impossible to talk across the differences. And we're usually so busy defending our perspective, whether we're a believer or a non believer, that it makes it very difficult to develop something that you share. Because most couples are trying to get the other one to come to their side as a way to have a shared foundation again. And that tug of war is exhausting. It's resentment inducing. It makes you start looking for validation elsewhere. I don't mean you're necessarily having an affair or something, but you can, find other people at church who feel sorry for you, or you can find your non-believing friends who feel sorry for you because you have a devout spouse, and you can kind of go and forge intimacy elsewhere rather than staying in the struggle. And when we feel emotionally disconnected, it's not a big stretch to feel sexually disconnected. Like, I don't want to open up to you. I don't want to be with you, if we are so different. And that can be even more true. It can be true for both, but especially true for women often, because we scan a little more for, is it safe to be with you? And if we don't feel understood, don't feel known, it can be easy to want to shut down the sexual relationship.
Okay, all those things that you were talking about, I think for in my personal experience, it yeah, just like what you were saying about trying to I think from my husband left the church about 20 years ago,
Mhm.
and I saw him as a villain, that
Yes.
he's the one that, he did this to me. I didn't have a choice in this matter, and I really felt like
Yes.
it's
A
really
very
tricky,
common feeling. Yes.
very tricky to want to be intimate with someone that you see as the bad guy. I think is a
100%.
is a
Right.
very
Yeah, very typical, like, you tricked me, even though I know of very few situations in which somebody literally tricked the person they married. It's that they got married and their mind changed, or their way of thinking changed. Um, but the one who's devout can often feel like, wait, I got a raw deal. And why should I want to be close to the person who's ruining my life? Yeah, right.
and you shared you have some just great quotes that are like mic drop moments for me that um I had taken a note of this. Most of us are more interested in punishing our spouse for not being what we want than we are in doing our part to create a warmer, more honest, and more collaborative marriage. Can you
Mm-hmm.
speak to that for a
Yeah,
minute?
100%. Well, first of all, our minds, we can bring our better selves to situations, and our lesser selves can show up really quickly. When you get under enough stress, enough anxiety, enough frustration, your limbic brain can start calling the shots. And our regressive brains, meaning our limbic brains, want control. And so when you're not getting what you want, one of the things I teach in my courses is that, the strengthening your relationship course is like, how you behave when you're not getting what you want determines the quality of a marriage. And so when we're not getting what we want, it is very, very easy to go into blaming, punishing, you know, scolding, preaching, manipulating, guilting, freezing them out, whatever it is. You're just like, what strategy can I use here
Mhm.
to try and get control or get them to be what I want them to be? And that's very different. And, I get it. Believe me, I can do these things too. But that's a very different question than, here's someone who's different than me in ways that can be painful and hard. And I don't know how to solve it. I don't know how to build a bridge across it. But I love this person. They matter to me, even if they're different or struggling or whatever it is. How do I talk about this issue in a way that's not just about getting them to be like me, but us better understanding each other, us being better friends, us trying to think creatively about how to make room for two of us in this marriage in a way that we're both doing okay, we're both thriving. And that just takes the prefrontal part of your brain. That takes your higher order thinking. That takes your stronger self. That takes your spiritual self to do that. And, when we think our spirituality is being challenged, our lesser natural man shows up to fight the fight in the name of goodness, in the name of righteousness, when we're being anything but loving.
And that brings me to another one of your quotes that I loved. You said using religion or faith to condemn each other, to be divisive, or to put ourselves above others is I can't even say the word.
Egregious. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Misunderstanding of what faith is, of what love is, and of what God is.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I think, first of all, I think this is what Christ kept really hammering on, if that's the right way to say it, in the New Testament, right? Which is that love is the law. Love is the point of all this. And the Sadducees and the Pharisees were hypocrites. They would use religion to look down their nose, to judge, to control, to condemn. And Christ is saying, who among us who has no sin, right? None of us. We're all sinners. We're all struggling. So stop using the law to harm. Use it to make your own heart right. Use it to grow yourself up. Use it to love others. But don't use it to puff yourself up, to make yourself better, to, judge when you don't know how you would be if you were in that person's mind, body, experience, history, right? If you were in your spouse's experience, you would probably be doing something very, very similar, right? Because it's very unlikely that they're just purely evil. And even if they were, it wouldn't justify you being evil in response.
I love that. Well, going back to that whole villain, senior spouse is a villain. Anytime I'm feeling
Yeah,
like a victim, I remind myself,
that's
okay,
right.
every victim needs a villain.
That's
And
right. Good. It's a good response.
that,
Right. Yep. And anytime we're vilifying human beings, because they think differently than us, believe differently, have different political views, we're off. It means we're in a distorted way of thinking about another child of God, as opposed to, I may disagree with them, but what can I learn from that person? What is their perspective on life that I can also understand, or that I can at least understand genuinely why they would think the way they think about it? Because that builds bridges. That builds understanding. That builds connection. That builds wisdom in people. I was reading David White. I was listening to a podcast with the poet David White, and he said something, and I'm not going to get this quite right, but he basically said you can't enter into an honest conversation with someone and exit the same way and exit as the same person. If it's an honest conversation, it will shape you, it will change you. It doesn't mean you just start thinking like they think. And sometimes we're so afraid that's what's going to happen that we can't even have an honest conversation. We're so busy, yeah, but, because we're so afraid to be shaped by their perspective. When we're really listening, well, it changes us, it softens us, it helps us think, okay, I can understand that. I can understand why you would think that. I can understand why. And I would say this to people that are believers or non believers, is that a lot of times there's like struggles around, why do you think that? How could you possibly believe that? Or how could you possibly not believe that? The thing is, there's a real answer. It's just often we don't want to know what the answer is.
mhm.
We don't want to know, why does the temple mean a lot to you? Why does it not mean a lot to you? Well, there's answers to it. And if you calm down enough to really understand it, well, it'll at least build more wisdom in you, more room to actually understand and not spend so much time condemning, even if you're disappointed, even if you wish you were more similar. And building the capacity God wants us to build, which is the ability to make room for each other and to care about each other in all of our imperfection, in all of our difference, in living in a fallen world. It's not easy. And the fact that we may think it should be easy, or if our spouse would get together, then it would be easy, or whatever we think, it's just not how it is. And I don't mean we have to go around miserable because we're in a fallen world, but understanding that love is the goal here. How do I care about this person in the face of my disappointment, in the face of our differences? Because you'll find a shared spirituality if you can do that. And I don't mean you'll believe everything exactly the same way, but you'll find a sense of meaning together because you love each other, even with your differences.
I love that idea. And in fact, that was one of my questions. We have this, um, sometimes we feel like, okay, we've lost this spiritual connection. We've lost this spiritual intimacy that we thought we had.
Mm.
Um, what do we do to create more of that connection and intimacy when we do see things differently? How do we
I
how do we
really
do
think
it?
it's through really loving each other. And what I mean by that is I want to understand you. I want to know you. I want to know why you think as you do, not so I can judge it, shape it, tell you how to be, leave a scripture on the coffee table for you to read later. Not that. We don't have
Doesn't
our
work
agenda.
well.
No, it does not work. I mean, anytime somebody's trying to, drop hints, just like, no, you're actually making them go 100% the other way. Like it's never
Yeah.
going to work. So, no, not to change them, but to actually understand them. That builds connection. That builds friendship. And because not just because it's like, oh, we don't judge each other, that's part of it, but also because it's like, well, I may think differently than you, but I understand why you think that way. I understand why that makes sense to you.
Hmm.
I've found this a lot, just even in talking to friends who think differently about politics than I do. And for a while, I think like much of our culture, we're just sort of in this sort of judgment of kind of rolling our eyes at people that think differently, as opposed to like, well, talk to me about it. Tell me how you think about it. Tell me why that makes sense to you. Tell me what that means to you. It really, really helps because you start understanding people aren't villains. People aren't horrible. People are trying to solve, they care about many of the exact same things I do. And we're in an information environment that's exploiting all of us, as opposed to we are actually different than our fellow human beings and think differently than us. Same with religion. We want to be like, oh, I mean, I think sometimes our Laman and Lemuel and Nephi and Lehi narratives don't help us because
Hmm.
I remember watching these cartoons that my nieces and nephews were watching 20 years ago, of the Book of Mormon stories. And Laman and Lemuel always had these like pointy chins and they spoke in this really like whiny, unrighteous way. And Nephi always had this like low, sexy voice.
All handsome.
Yeah, exactly, all handsome and everything. And 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 I understand for a child there's a sense in that, but the thing is it isn't true. Like we want to divide the world into there's the good ones and the bad ones. And the problem is evil's in all of us. That's what Christ kept trying to teach us. Who among us doesn't sin? Who among us doesn't want to at times do things that are indecent, unfair, unloving? So stop vilifying other people and puffing yourself up in response to that. And instead look for the humanity and the goodness in the other person because it will teach you. You'll learn from it. And when you can genuinely learn from people, they get more receptive to learning from you too. I don't mean you're doing it to manipulate. I just mean you start building an honest bridge. And so, what I think happens in couples that may have faith differences but stay genuinely open to each other is they start building more understanding into the marriage and into the connection of one another. They start building more compassion for who the other person is and why they can or cannot believe, why they believe, why they don't believe. But you start understanding you're both pointing in the same direction, or that you want to, if it's a good soul that you're with, right? Even if they
Mhm.
don't believe as you do. And so you can share in that shared goal to do right by your kids, to do right by one another, to care for one another. I'm good friends with a couple where he never was a member of the church, is an atheist, in fact, and she's a believing member of the church. And so they got married under that understanding. But, I can see there, and I'm sure that's not been perfect for them. I'm sure it's been hard at times, but as a, you know, third party sort of looking in on that, you can see the ways that they've really tried to reach towards the other. My husband doesn't want me to teach the idea of obedience because that is an idea he doesn't like, to teach the kids to obey to a church authority. So how do I respect that and think about who I am in this and maybe teach it differently? Or, he will come with her to church and sit through sacrament meeting, even though he's not a believer. He's there supporting her because he knows it matters to her. So they're good friends, and they work actively to build a bridge across these differences in an honest way. No one's trying to get the other one to be like them. They know that's never going to happen. And they're actually remarkably similar, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know if it's after being married 20 years, that just is what happens, but they think differently. One says, I believe in God very much, and the other says, I do not. But on the other hand, they both care deeply about living moral, good lives, raising their children well, serving others, doing what's good for the marriage. So, you can find these shared values, even if
Hmm.
the way you reinforce and support them are different.
So, okay, and I love that. And I love when that works in my marriage because I've seen it work a lot of
Yeah.
times. And then there's those examples that I've got clients that are coming to me saying, um, some of these harder things, these really tender topics like pornography
Mm,
or how to teach our kids about sex or wearing
mm,
garments. Can we,
mm.
so like to one person, it's like,
Sure.
this isn't, can we, let's, sorry, I just rapid
Sure.
fire.
Oh, yeah.
Let's look at garments first.
Yeah.
Give us some examples on what we could do, because sometimes a spouse is like, that's great. I respect you for doing that. I know it's important. And other times it's like, no, I don't want you
Yeah.
to wear these. What do I do about that?
Well, it's just it's being willing to, so for the person that hates it in the other, what they're saying is they're not attractive. I feel like the church controls you. I don't, I sometimes that person, the non-believer, can feel like, I feel like your loyalty is to the church. I mean, I've worked with plenty of these clients, right?
Yeah.
Your loyalty is to the church, but it's not to us. It's not to me. It's not to our marriage. And so it can feel like the garments are not only are they unattractive, but they are like a symbol of a division
Mm,
between them.
mm-hmm.
For the person who's a believer, it's like, listen, this means something to me. These are covenants that matter to me. This helps me feel closer to God. It's not about not loving you. I love you. I just don't, why can't you just respect what matters to me here?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, both are right. Like that is to say, they both have a sense and a truth in it that matters. So what I would say is the couple that's growing is staying in an honest conversation about it. What I would call an intimate conversation rather than a controlling conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, our lesser minds want to control. We get in there and we defend. Why are garments stupid? Why are garments sacred? Like there's just like a big power struggle for the couple that never gets anywhere. John Gottman's research talks about this, that couples will fight about the same issues for their like entire marriages. Well, you don't have to. I mean, on some level, yes, because couples just kind of have generic differences. And then those differences were going to show up in different ways through the whole, 70 years they're married or wherever number of years they're married. But on the other hand, it's also because a lot of times we don't want to grow. We don't want to say, like, well, talk to me about why they matter to you. Talk to me about why they're so hard for you to see on me. And out of the decision of, I love this person, I love them more than just a validation of my view, but I'm not throwing my view away either. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we, this is why my podcast is called Room for Two, is like, how do we create a marriage in which we can both exist in our differences? That we we can find a way to do this. And so, I've worked with couples like this where the more believing spouse is sometimes not wearing garments, like surprising in one situation, surprising her husband, you know, they go out to eat, she puts his hand under her skirt. He's like, oh, very exciting. All, anyway, just things like that.
Yeah.
Right. Um, but they're like finding it because I think a lot of times when you can see that flexibility, and I'm making this extension because I love you. You're not saying it to your spouse like that. Like, listen, look up. I'm trying to make you, I'm doing this big sacrifice for you. Not that. But like, no, I do care about you and I can be flexible because I know that it matters to you. That's what builds love between people. It's like, I know you're different than me and you're willing to extend yourself. That makes me know that I'm loved by you. When we get into entitlement and self righteousness, and Latter-day Saints can be self-righteous, but so
Yeah.
can post-Mormons be self-righteous.
Mm-hmm.
Self-righteous is a very human condition. And when we try to do self-righteous as opposed to understanding and compassion, we build the walls and we build division. That's why marriage is tough. It's tough work, even if you're very similar, because it's asking you to really care about a person who's going to be different than you in many ways.
Okay, I love those examples. Can we talk about pornography for a second? Because it's like, okay, I can understand why. Let's just look at a couple of these
Yeah.
examples, and maybe it's exactly the
It
same
kind of
principles.
is. I mean, the thing is when people are just met with judgment, they tend to dig down into their respective positions and they're both in narrow, rigid positions. Pornography is good. It's only because of your sexual repression that you think this is not good. I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. Like that's like a digging down position versus everything about that is terrible. There is no room to understand why you would even like it. And it just drives a kind of a false level of division as
Hmm.
opposed to, that Chinese finger puzzle where you have to go in to
Yeah.
release, right? You go towards the other person. Talk to me about why you think differently about pornography. Talk to me why you're afraid of pornography. What scares you about it? And you just start trying to get rid of your self righteousness enough to just speak sincerely. This is why it scares me. This is the effect I don't want. This is what I'm afraid of. Right. And vice or the person that says, I want or I'm not, I don't think it's as big a deal. Why don't you think it's as big of a deal? And again, your goal is not to condemn, but to understand.
Yeah.
How does my spouse think about this? And you'd think that would just be so easy, but that is not easy. I know in my own life when my spouse has a different point of view and I'm just like, it's like my whole goal is to explain why he's wrong about something. And, it's just like, my goodness, Jennifer, just like settle down enough to just understand a perspective. Like, it doesn't mean I have to agree with it or have to be beholden to it. Just think about it, just understand
Yeah.
it. And if there's something for me to learn from it, then that's a gift. Learn it. And if I think
Hmm.
there's nothing in there that's worth learning from, I don't need to accept it. But I've never had the experience that there's nothing in there that I can learn from. Never. There's always a way to better understand my spouse, a better way to think about life, a better way. There's always something,
Yeah.
right? And the more you do it, you also invite openness in return.
And I think that, and I was going to ask you this earlier, but that's what intimacy is, being able to
Yeah.
be vulnerable. I think so often we think of intimacy as just sex, but even before
Yeah.
there's that being able to be, I
Yeah.
see you, you see me. We are,
Yeah. The way I define intimacy is to know and be known. It's not sex. In fact, it drives me a little nuts that we use that as the euphemism because sex can be very non-intimate. It just depends on what kind of sex you're having. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So
yeah.
intimacy is like knowing and being known. And the reason that our theology is a theology of it's a theology of intimacy, knowing and being known by God, knowing
Mm,
and being known by a spouse. That's what expands our souls. It's truth. It's looking for what's true. And when we're so busy thinking we've already got it and we don't need to learn from anybody
Mm-hmm.
and not look at ourselves through our spouse's eyes, I mean, that's just pride. That's an unwillingness to grow. That's sin. Sin is the refusal to keep growing. And so, if
Wow.
instead we're willing to use the intimacy of our relationships to see ourselves more clearly, to understand another more clearly, that grows our souls up and grows us into wiser, more loving people. The specifics of our beliefs are often not as important as the way who we're becoming in the process.
Mm.
Like there's many things I believe that are false. I just don't yet know they're false. That is to say, it's because I'm in my experience and they make sense to me. And that, because my experience has kind of made them seem true enough because hasn't yet been challenged enough by life. But it's not the fact that I have things wrong that would make me sinful. It's whether or not I stay open to learning and growing and changing and letting myself become wiser and more loving through that process. That's the measure.
Wow. So beautiful. It reminds me I can't speak for a second here. It reminds me another one of your mic drop moments for me that I share this with my clients all the time. You said, how do I need to handle myself in this moment to be a
Mhm.
person I respect?
Yeah, exactly. I thought that thought this morning to myself, like, okay, because I could feel my limbic brain wanting to engage. And I had until I got to the top of the stairs to get my mind into a more do what I can respect. That's all I have control over is be someone I respect in this moment. And, and that's all we have. But that's a big deal because it's pushing us out of our reactive, self-justified, um, mean minds towards our wiser, more loving, more fair, more collaborative minds. Like, can we work together on this? Can we, uh, how do we approach this in a way, this problem that we're having, in a way that is fair to two of us? And that takes our higher minds.
And I think it's so easy. I know for me, when it was like, well, going back to that, you were talking about how we're often self-righteous. It's like, no, I'm living the gospel. I have a temple
Mhm.
recommend. I'm
Mhm.
serving. I'm doing this checklist
Mhm.
of
Yeah,
things. And it's so easy to be like, you're wrong. You're not
right.
doing these.
Exactly. Exactly. And, I've seen plenty of couples in these one's in and one is not. And the non-believer has their own checklist very easily. Yeah, but
Mhm,
you think this and you think that. And, that's just dumb. And again, we love that idea. We love the self reinforcement of checklists and ways to
mhm.
say, I'm good, you're not good. I get it, you don't. And that's just our lesser mind engaging, our sinful mind, in my opinion, as opposed to what does it mean to care about this person and who are they? We don't how to say it like as Christ taught us, love is the law. And everything that we do religiously is about helping us to learn to love. We often get it mixed up. Like, no, the point is to do all the church things, as opposed to the church things are there to help us to love. And so, because we like checklists and we like thinking we are good, as Christ said, no one is good but God. Like, don't we should not get into that mindset of proving we are good
Mhm.
because we are actually in the act of doing that, keeping ourselves from doing good.
I know for me, for so long, it was like I had this thought as a life coach, I'm
Yeah.
helping people look at their thoughts.
Yeah.
And my big thought was, I didn't sign up for this.
Mhm.
This is not, you are in the way of me getting what I want.
Yeah.
And
I would say, and I would have said to you, you did sign up for this because you promised God you were going to love this man, which is very different than, I mean, I agree with you in a way because most of us get married not to love another person, but to lock in somebody to love us and help us fulfill our life plan. I mean, you know what I mean? Like we tell ourselves, yes, I'm going to love this person as long as they love me and they do what I want.
As long as they follow the plan.
Exactly. As opposed to the terror of what we're actually doing when we get married is saying, I'm going to bring my best to this other human being, even when they disappoint me, even when they're exactly not what I want, because that always can happen in a marriage at some point, right? You're doing exactly what makes me feel terrible right now. I mean, we're attracted to people that are opposite than us, for heaven's sakes. You know, you're signing up to be stretched. I mean, let's just face it. And so then when we act like something's going wrong, it's because we haven't really paid attention to the process that we are signing up for is a soul stretching process, which is very, very valuable to the larger plan of what we're here for.
I always joke that when I'm signing my kids up for sports, like a soccer camp or something,
Yeah.
there's that waiver at the end, and it's like you put in their information and then it asks for a credit card. But before it'll take your credit card, you have to go through, you
Right.
scroll and scroll and scroll, and
And then
we
sign.
never read that. We just hit
No, of course not.
accept.
It's so true. I'm like,
So
I probably just sworn away my youngest child or whatever. But yeah, exactly. No, and we just say, yeah, good enough, whatever, it should be fine. And that's right. That's kind of how marriage is.
And I think of like that, I don't know if they had kiosks in heaven or something, but it's like, yeah, I just want to go. Yep, 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 I'll do it. And so I do. It feels so much better at this point. I mean, 20 years later, and a lot of therapy and a lot
Sure.
of coaching,
Yep.
recognizing, no, I did sign up for this. And this
Yep.
is exactly this experience is helping me to become more Christ-like, to
Yep.
love someone.
Yep.
And I didn't want it to look like that for a long time, but
Yeah.
now being able to recognize like, no, this is
Yes.
exactly what I need to help me
Yep. Absolutely.
progress. Some
Yep.
days I still don't like it, but I
Sure. Sure. No, definitely.
yeah. Okay, are there any other things? I know you've worked with thousands of people with through stuff like this. Are there any other things that you do see in a mixed faith relationship that we haven't talked about?
Well, I would just be really careful speaking both to the believing spouse and the non believing spouse to not just go get easy validation from your respective groups, right? Because most non believing people often have groups that they connect with online and so on. And there can be a lot of like, how to say it, just validating of poor you, because you have
Mhm.
a spouse who thinks this other way. And believing spouses can go and find a ready-made support group of we're praying for you and your spouse, your spouse, like kind of
Mhm.
a judgment or a condescension in it. And I think that's very dangerous. Like I get it on one level, especially initially you're looking for, am I crazy? Like you want to know that you're not alone, but you have to be really careful that you don't use it as a way to not deal with your marriage. And when we can find ready made validation outside of the marriage, it can quickly create deeper division in the marriage
Mm.
rather than, all right, I love you. You're my primary commitment of love. And how do we work out this relationship? How do we truly make this partnership primary? How do we work through our differences and go through the soul stretching process of of what that actually is? I've worked with couples where, this is just one situation I have in mind, where was talking to his respective groups and then just has the idea like the kids going and sitting with the bishop is a kind of abuse, right? Now I understand that there's wisdom and truth and a good perspective in there, but he's coming at it after talking to his group that this is just 100% abusive, wrong,
Mm.
bad, and then coming in like a bulldozer to his wife, who is herself a good, moral, reasonable person, right? And she only wants to put the brakes on because there's just nothing in there that's like, look, here are my concerns. Here's why I'm anxious about it.
Yeah.
Why do you feel good about this? That's a conversation that can actually build some bridge. He's coming in like, I'm the good one here. I'm the one who gets it. You don't. Of course, she's going to dig down in the face of that, then he
Mm-hmm.
has more fodder to go back to his, victim group and think about why he's a victim, right? And so does she.
Yeah.
And so you just drive a division. It's a very easy thing to do. The much harder thing to do is say, talk to me about why you think this is a good idea. Talk to me about why you think this is a bad idea. And look for what is it that I can agree with in what my spouse is saying. Because the reality is, people are not as different as they actually think they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so they get so busy highlighting the differences that it looks like they can't build a bridge across anything, when in reality, they actually agree on a lot. It's like, what do we do about these, these end the tails of our differences? How do we deal with those things in a way that we can both be at peace with?
And I think recognizing like what do we have in common? Well, in that
Yes,
situation, we both love our child fiercely
exactly.
and want the best thing.
And we don't exactly. And this is why I think an interview can be a valuable thing. This is why I think it can be a not a good thing. And
Mm-hmm.
there's some way to deal with that, right? There's an answer in there if you both care about finding it. It's also similar, like people have said, like, how do I deal with church instruction or religious instruction? Well, they're not easy questions, right? But there's usually about 95% that people agree on. We
Mm-hmm.
want our kids to understand honesty matters, loyalty matters, right? That we want them to persevere, to do difficult things. I think the primary difference is a question of authority, right? But you can still teach your kids two different ways of thinking about that.
Yeah.
And so then how do you work together to say these are principles we can both stand on together? And these are our differences, but we can even offer our differences to our kids and let our kids sort out for themselves what they think. But that actually helps kids to be more autonomous thinkers, which is a very valuable thing to have.
And they're going to end up doing that sooner or
Anyway,
later
that's
anyway.
right. Exactly. And if they can see parents who can love each other and manage those differences, those kids
Mhm.
are so they have such an amazing head start if they can see that modeled.
I love that.
Mm.
Are there any other things that you want to share?
Just that only thing I would say is that love is difficult and extremely valuable. Like, it's just as hard as it is. Like, we love validation, we love reinforcement. It's very easy to go get it. Some people, because I talk about the challenges around validation pursuit, some people think I hate validation, but I love validation. And I sometimes like validation way more than love. Okay. So believe me, it
Yes.
feels it feels good. But love is the thing that makes us better people, makes us more capable of intimacy, makes us more capable of friendship, and is the essential skill in any good marriage and in any meaningful spirituality. So even though it's hard, nothing's going wrong. This is what life does to us if we will let it. This is what marriage does to us if we will let it. So it's like, for me, sometimes when I'm exercising, I'll be like, oh, I can't wait till this is over. And it just makes it harder,
Yeah.
rather than, look, I'm here for an hour of my day, like, lean into it. And it just makes it easier. I don't know exactly why, but psychologically, I'm embracing the suck, I'm embracing the hard,
Mhm.
and it just somehow makes it easier to do the hard thing. Mhm.
I think that is just that mindset is so important. And I think that's one of my I've got my favorite thoughts that help me through things, and that nothing has gone wrong here. In the
Yeah.
beginning, if you would have had me say that 20 years ago, I would have been like, no,
No, let me tell
listen.
you.
But now it's just
Sure.
like, no, this
Yeah.
isn't, this is an opportunity. It doesn't mean it's not going to be hard. And that
Right.
I always have some emotions to process around different situations, but
Right.
just reminding myself that no, nothing has gone wrong. This
Right.
is what I signed up for, to learn and to
Right.
grow and to stretch.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
good stuff. Jennifer, where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you offer and what you do?
So the best place to go is just my website, which is Finlayson-Fife.com. And then on there you can Conversations with Dr. Jennifer is just a free podcast where I'm having conversations like this. Room for Two is a paid podcast where I'm working with LDS couples around faith differences, sexual desire issues, right? Relationship issues. And I'm doing real coaching with those couples. They're voice distorted and they have pseudonyms, but you get to hear me really work with couples on how to create more intimate marriages. And then I have 5 online courses that are really for an LDS audience of how to talk to your kids about sex, how to build a more intimate marriage. There's 2 of those, 2 courses for that, and then a men's course and a women's course about self and sexual development. So anyway, it's all there. You can learn lots about me there. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I just am so thankful for this conversation that I feel like I could talk to you all day long about these topics. I know that this is going to help a lot of my listeners, so I really, really appreciate you being here.
Great.
Um, uh, and I was just making, I'm looking down at my notes to see there's anything else I wanted to, I think one of the big things that I have learned from you that I really should probably have tattooed on my forehead is just this, how do I need to handle myself in this moment to be a person I respect?
Yeah.
I love that. And that's really all we
Yeah.
have in our control. So,
That's right. That's
well,
right.
thank you so much. And I know this is going to help a lot of people. And that's everything that we've got for you today. Make a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.